Today I'm going to be showing you how to manipulate your space to actually make you feel something in it. Luxury is a mind game. People have this perspective that luxury means spending more and it's more expensive. And this is the furthest thing from the case. Real luxury is the psychological trick that we play on our brain. Luxury is not a style, it's how we experience a space. That's why you can feel expensive in a dark, dimly lit hotel room versus a waiting room in an office. Now let's kill a myth that everyone and their sister has heard, is that small spaces feel smaller if you use dark colors. This is the furthest thing from the truth. And if you've been following my renovation online, you know that the colors that I use are rich, deep, saturated colors. It's all about the lighting that you pair with it to make it feel cozy, environmental, and atmospheric instead of just making it feel like a dark cave. Color drenching and cocooning, this is going to be the easiest way to change out how you feel in a space because it envelops the entire room. There's a psychology behind a dark room that gives you comfort. It feels safe. The average person, I'll give them that. Not everyone feels safe in a dark space, especially if you're afraid of the dark. When you do the same color on your walls, the ceiling, the trim, the baseboards, the crown molding, and even the doors, this creates an environment of the perspective of how you're perceiving the room that no longer feels like you have points to draw your attention to. It really wraps and cocoons the space to almost give you like a warm hug. This removes your brain's need to find landing points of contrasting trim and door that create a landing space in a room. It also breaks down the boundaries of your eye feeling like it needs to have this sense of repetition of connecting floor to wall to ceiling and then back down again. If your eyes are constantly jumping from details in a room, this immediately triggers a cortisol spike. And this is the last thing you want to do when you're fighting the feeling that you want in a space. In a small room, when you're trying to do that light and airy, it almost feels overwhelming because your space doesn't have that lineup point that makes it feel cozy. You cannot have a light and airy space that feels cozy. Those do not exist on the same plane. When you color drench that entire space, it creates a womb-like experience that wraps you in it to make you feel safe. Now, a question for you to let me know in the comments, because we talked about the bedroom and perspective of this, especially when it comes to color drenching. Do you want your bedroom to feel expansive or make you feel protected? Because that's a feeling that you need to take in perspective when you're designing and decorating it. The hotel vibe is a trap that a lot of people fall into when they're designing around the psychology of a space. Hotels are designed with animosity. There's no history. There's no pattern. It's a temporary space that is well designed in the moment for a very niche topic. The brain gives you a freeing feeling because there's no connection to the space outside of the aesthetic of it. And when you're on vacation, you have no responsibilities. Everyone that I have ever had a consultation with, their immediate attention for what they want is they want a hotel vibe. They always say that they love staying at hotels, and I get it. But the different perspective on how psychology works, it rewires your brain into thinking there should be nothing there. Because when you're in a hotel, you don't have to worry about changing the sheets. You don't have to worry about washing them. Everything is there and done for you, which is very different from a home that you live in. When you do it at home, it feels empty because you don't have that connection to your personal item. If you're trying to create that hotel vibe, I always say that 80% can be done with that kind of style where it feels less friction, and 20% you need that personal aspect to it to ground the space to make you feel welcome and cozy. Without that friction, your brain doesn't feel at home. It literally feels like a guest. And it really comes down to living in your space. Do you like it styled or do you like it more minimal? And if you really remove all of those personal items from your room, whether it's a bedroom or a living room space, is it really yours anymore? That's something else to think about as well. Now we're going to go into the psychology of the reveal of a room. This is another really great perspective that'll make you understand how your brain reacts to different zones and different spaces as you're going through your house. Your brain loves a high contrast moment, whether it's short and tall, dark and light, or skinny and wide. This is how you create that flex space of walking into a zone that feels separate from the others. Whether it's a skinny hallway that goes into an expansive room that's a different color, this allows your brain to disconnect for a room so it feels different and zoned. You get a dopamine hit when you have that high contrast, but a high contrast can also be super overwhelming. If you're using that stark white and a dark black, that is too high contrast. That's going to create a visual blur, but also a bore over time because that's going to be something that you're immediately drawn to attention-wise and you get sick of it very quickly. Our brain is also wired to look for certain symmetries. whether it's symmetrical or asymmetrical. It creates a level of balance in a room that creates an atmosphere that feels safe and comforting as well as inviting. The human brain is always going to look for patterns in how it connects. As I've mentioned before in previous videos, it's a path of travel that you want your eyes to go on, and it creates a journey through the space, whether it be through patterns and those connecting points or even layered lighting. This creates this atmosphere that makes you feel comfortable. If you've ever been in a room that feels too flat, you know it's boring, uncomfortable, and you don't want to be there for very long, versus going into a space that feels layered with textures and colors and lighting. It feels inviting and you want to stay there longer. And the grand reveal, I'm going to say this up front, that's going to make a lot of people very angry, is not your TV. Creating that contrast between a black box on a wall is not going to give you that same psychological effect of enjoying a room. But remember this, too much symmetry is also a problem. If you create a pattern that is easily recognizable, it creates a sense of boredom. So mix it up and create a nice vast contrast between the scale and proportions that work well with that to make you feel unique in a space. Luxury is about tension and resolution. It's not about being matchy-matchy. The power of proportion is also going to change how you feel in a space. Underscaling items screams hesitation and a lack of control for not feeling comfortable. I'm talking about a tiny rug, a tiny artwork, or something that just looks off in a room that doesn't feel like the proportions connect with everything else. Your brain reads this as uncertain and evidently unwelcoming. Luxury is the absence of hesitation. Everything looks and feels intentional. Larger scale items are always going to give that sense of grandeur, but they need to make sure they have a connection between everything else in the room. The hero piece or that high contrast moment tells anyone walking into the space, the owner knows what they want. This is the direction, either it's the path of travel or where your eyes are going to land in the space. Sometimes it's a beautiful sculptural staircase. Sometimes it's a beautiful coffee table. Sometimes it's a contrasted color that creates that pop that leads you into the room. Sometimes it's a grand piece of artwork. This is how you create that moment where your eyes feel comfortable. If your eye has nothing to land on and it doesn't have that right perspective, it feels really off. Once your eyes register that anchoring piece, it feels and registers control. That's what you want in a room to have that sense of luxury. So a question to ask yourself is, what piece in your room creates that sense of dominance, or do you have everything that it has a different value and perspective that your eyes compete for to land on? This is another really great way of understanding of where your eye travels and how it feels in a space, because the value of sight is going to change the value and the psychology perspective of how you feel in a room. Materials and visual weight play another really great perspective in a room to create and understand the feeling that you want. Ask yourself, do these items feel substantial and do they feel too heavy? One rule I like to follow is alternating base of solid and hollow. And that can be as easy as the sofa being a solid base comes all the way down to the floor versus your coffee table that has open legs. It allows a nice clean palette of that visual weight that feels comfortable versus doing both block that feels very heavy and proportionate to the lower half of your floor when nothing else feels like it belongs. You can also think about the visual weight of other items like stone, wood, linen. Each of them have a visual representation of how the psychology perceives them. Linen can also be heavy depending on the textile value of it. All of these items need to add up to a value of balance that feels proportionate and scaled in your room once again. The luxury of these items can literally be found in the weight of the stone or the lightness of the linen, but both of them need to compare to each other. Now, biophilic luxury is really important to incorporate into a space. Our brains are hardwired to always be attracted to nature, whether that's the color palette or literal plants in a space. Having that connection to a real item elevates it to a sense of luxury that you can only get when you're outside enjoying it as well. And in addition to that biophilic luxury comes with the textures and the colors that come with it as well. Think about a wood grain that has that beautiful sense of depth and dimension to it. Same with stone. It's always going to have that value of dimension to it compared to a flat surface like a cheap laminate that's just a wrap all the way around. But as soon as you get up close, that sense of fakeness completely destroys it. Luxury design prioritizes emphasizes organic complexity. And what I mean by this is balancing out the softness of minimal and more detailed items. So if you have a minimal space, the plants and the structures should be minimal as well to match that detail. I don't want to see a giant fern taking up the volume of space. I want to see the perspective of a really tall stem and a giant bush on top. That's going to create that contrast that really elevates the space. Sound and sensory experience is also going to change the psychology of how you appreciate or depreciate a space. Luxury is always going to be multisensory. You always want to think about the different values of how you experience a space, and hearing and smelling are going to really change up your game because they really allow you to have that emotional impact of remembering a space. If you think about great hotel rooms or great hotel lobbies, they have a signature scent that creates a lasting memory that every time you smell it, it triggers you to remember that moment. And in an instance of your own home, there's multiple ways that you can impact that. Soft close hinges is another really great way to really elevate that soft application that allows a sense of pause in your room. Solid core doors are another really great way to elevate it because compared to those hollow core doors, they create that echo when you close them versus that substantial weight that you can feel on the impact. The acoustic softness of rugs and textiles in your room help absorb sound from the exteriors to make yourself feel more calm. And even scent, having a beautiful candle or a diffuser that you resonate with is going to elevate not only your space for yourself, but for your guests when they come visit. Now I have to ask you, if I'm going to walk into your house blindfolded, am I going to be disturbed with the smell or am I going to be pleasantly surprised? That's a question that you always need to ask yourself when you're entering a guest home and when you're inviting ones over to yours. Now there's a whole bunch of emotional impacts that you can create a space to elevate the psychology of design, but these are my quick go-to ones that really allow you to not only experience a space, but feel something different. And if you're serious about shifting the energy that you have in your space, you need to watch my other video on the psychology and energy that color gives off in your space, because that's going to really elevate all of those sensory feelings. And if you made it this far, you clearly know about your space or you're willing to know even more about it. So make sure you like this video, and if you aren't already subscribed. If you liked watching me, you can hear all about my daily tips and tricks and everything interior design related on my socials on Instagram and TikTok at Mr. Phoenix Gray. And if you're ever second guessing yourself, just ask, what would Design Daddy do?